It came bearing the weight of dead suns. Commander Ava Rostova watched the anomaly resolve on the main viewer of the TSC Stargazer. Her ship was a patient hunter, a long-range surveyor designed to chart the quiet darkness between nascent stars. This sector, designated the Obsidian Anchorage, was supposed to be such quiet place. It was a cold nebula of unignited gas and mineral dust, a graveyard of primordial matter, where the only currency was silence. The object before them shattered that silence not with a sound, but with a presence that felt older than the surrounding void. It was a shard of impossible geometry, impossibly vast and utterly inert. The stakes were immediate. Any vessel of this size, derelict or not, in the disputed anchorage, would ignite a firestorm between the Terran Confederacy and the Glyptan hegemony. Deep within its hull, something ancient slept its dormant arrays, etched with the sigil of a forgotten age. "Report," Lieutenant Rostova said, her voice a low anchor in the humming quiet of the bridge. Her reflection in the forward viewport was a pale ghost. Tired eyes fixed on the impossible artifact. Jian Li leaned over his console, the light painting his face in hues of green and amber. "No power signatures, Commander. No heat, no emissions of any kind. It's colder than the background radiation, which shouldn't be possible." He adjusted a filter, and a faint wireframe shimmered over the object's image. "Hull composition is unconfirmed. Our deep scanners can't get a purchase. It's like trying to map a shadow." The object was a long-bladed spindle, its surface a patchwork of crystalline structures and what looked like petrified organic plating. Faint lines, almost like circuitry or scripture, spiraled across its length. A single recurring emblem marked its flanks, a balanced scale held within a circle of 9 stars. This was not a design any known power would claim. It was a relic from a time of unremembered laws. "Sub-Commander Thorne, tactical status?" Rostova asked, turning her gaze to the weapons officer. Thorne's station was dark, save for the soft glow of standby indicators. "We are cold and quiet, Commander. No weapons energized. But I've painted the object with passive target locks just in case it decides to wake up." His knuckles were white where he gripped the console's edge. He was a man who saw threats, not wonders. "We are not alone," he added, his tone flat. "Long-range Dratis just picked up an inbound vector. Glyptan hegemony patrol cutter. Fast-moving." Rostova's jaw tightened. The hegemony were cosmic vultures, corporate privateers, wrapped in the thin veneer of a government. They saw the anchorage not as a frontier to be explored, but as a resource to be strip-mined. "Calliope," she said, addressing the ship's mind. "Calculate their arrival time and likely intent." A calm, synthesized voice filled the bridge, devoid of emotion, but rich with data. "The hegemony vessel Gilded Talon will intercept our position in 47 standard minutes. Its energy profile is consistent with a salvage and claim mission. Probability of hostile intent if we remain on station 89%. The AI's logic was a cold, hard diamond. A mirror reflecting the simple truth of their situation. "They think it's a derelict ripe for the picking," Lee murmured, staring at the approaching threat icon. "They have no idea what they've found." Rostova looked back at the silent vessel. It felt less like a ship and more like a cathedral dedicated to a forgotten god. Its silence was not the emptiness of death, but the patient stillness of a judge. She would not let the hegemony's jackals tear it apart for scrap. "Thorne, bring deterrence-level systems online." Quietly. "Jian, I want every sensor we have focused on that artifact." Calliope, open a channel to the hegemony. She straightened her uniform jacket, the simple act a private ritual of resolve. Her reflection now seemed less a ghost and more a guardian. A sense of ancient duty began to settle over the small bridge. The response from the Gilded Talon was exactly as arrogant and dismissive as Rostova expected. The face of its captain, a man with a precisely manicured beard, and the predatory eyes of a boardroom shark filled the main screen. Terran Confederacy Surveyor Stargazer. He began, his voice dripping with condescension. You are trespassing in a Glyptan-claimed development zone. The object you are observing has been designated for corporate reclamation under Hegemony Salvage Mandate 7 Delta. Stand down and withdraw, or you will be fired upon. Hegemony Captain Rostova replied, her tone as level as polished steel. This is a contested sector under the Armistice of Cygnus. Your mandate has no authority here. Furthermore, this object is of unknown origin and potential first contact significance. It is not a lump of ore for your refineries. The captain smirked. First contact, it's a derelict commander, a dead ship. Our scans show no life, no power. We will claim it, and your protest will be logged and ignored. His eyes flicked to something off-screen. You have 5 minutes to comply. The screen went blank. The first move in the game had been a command, not a conversation. He's not bluffing, Thorne said, his hands moving across his console. His weapon ports are open. He's charging primary capacitors. Calliope options, Rostova snapped. Option 1, withdraw the AI, stated immediately. Probability of survival, 99.9%. Option 2, engage the Gilded Talon. Probability of our victory, 41%. Probability of severe damage to the Stargazer, 73%. Option 3, maintain position and attempt non-violent deterrence. Probability of hegemony attack, 94%. The numbers were stark. They were a survey ship, not a warship. They were outgunned and isolated. Yet turning her back on the silent artifact felt like a profound betrayal. It was a feeling that defied calculus, a human instinct that Calliope could not quantify. A deeper knowledge whispered that some things were meant to be guarded. Rostova looked at the sigil on the ancient hull, the scales of justice. Jian, you said it's colder than the void. Is it absorbing energy? It seems to be Li confirmed. All ambient radiation particle motion, even our own passive sensor pings. It's a perfect energy sink. The amount of power it must have processed over the millennia is astronomical. A desperate idea began to form in Rostova's mind, a gambit that rested on a legend. The old texts, the ones dismissed as folklore, spoke of the first expansion fleets, the so-called saint ships that brought human law to the stars. They were said to be arbiters, not conquerors. Thorne, target the space between us and the Gilded Talon. Prepare to vent a charged plasma stream, not a weapon, a warning shot. Make it bright. Commander Thorne asked, confused. That will drain our shields for a full second. He'll cut us in half. Do it, she ordered. Calliope, on my mark, send the hegemony a single repeating transmission. A simple binary count. Nothing else. Just the numbers. The ship was built to teach by numbers, the old legends claimed. It only awoke for those who understood the language of pure reason. It was a wild chance, a prayer to a machine god she wasn't sure existed. Rostova watched the countdown timer for the hegemony's ultimatum tick away. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the cold, silent theater of space. A loader on Glyptan docking ring 7 shifted a crate of refined iridium, his muscles aching from the long shift. He thought of his daughter's upcoming birthday, the cost of the synth cake a nagging weight in his mind. Overhead, the comm system chattered about a corporate patrol vessel on a high-value salvage run in the anchorage. He hoped the bonus would be big. More salvage meant more work, more pay. He didn't think about who might have been on the derelict, only about the credits that would flow from its metal skin. 5 seconds, Commander Thorne announced, his voice tight. "Now," Rostova commanded. The stargazer shuddered as a brilliant spear of turquoise plasma erupted from its forward emitters. It was a blinding flare, a line drawn in the darkness. Simultaneously, the comm system began its endless, toneless chant, 0101. The captain of the Gilded Talon reacted instantly. His ship's primary cannon fired a lance of coherent energy aimed directly at the stargazer's now vulnerable bridge. Time seemed to slow. Rostova watched the bolt of incandescent fury cross the void, a final lethal judgment. But it never arrived. A ripple, impossibly fast, emanated from the ancient ship. It was not a shield of energy, but a distortion of space-time itself. The hegemony's energy bolt struck this invisible wall and vanished. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. Then, from the artifact's hull, 1,000 tiny points of light flared to life. The spiraling script across its surface began to glow with a soft internal luminescence. The old giant was stirring from its aeon-long slumber. On the bridge of the Gilded Talon, alarms blared. The ship's energy bolt had not just been blocked, it had been absorbed, catalogued, and understood. The captain stared in disbelief as his own weapon's energy signature was projected back at him, not as a weapon, but as a data stream. It flooded his systems, a relentless tide of information that detailed the precise energy cost, the potential lethality, and the legal ramifications of his hostile act under 1,000 forgotten treaties. His weapons systems overloaded and went dead. "Status," the hegemony captain roared. "Weapons are offline. All power is being rerouted to diagnostics, sir. The derelict is... It's talking to our ship's computer. It's not a language, it's mathematics. It's teaching our systems the consequences of our actions." On the Stargazer, the crew was silent, paralyzed by awe. The ancient vessel was now awake, its hull glowing with the light of a captured star. The binary count from their comm had been the key, a sign of intelligent life, attempting a rational discourse before violence. The plasma vent had been the proof of intent, a warning, not an attack. They had passed some kind of test. A voice. A chorus of 1,000,000 blended consciousnesses echoed not over the comm, but directly inside their minds. It was calm, impossibly old, and imbued with an authority that dwarfed empires. "Who speaks with a counting voice?" the entity asked. "Who draws a line and asks it be respected?" Rostova found her breath, her voice trembling slightly. "I am Commander Eva Rostova of the Terran Confederacy survey ship Stargazer. We are explorers. We come in peace." "Peace is the result of agreement," the voice replied. "Agreement is the result of reason. You have offered reason. The other has offered force. The ledger is now open." A section of the artifact's hull slid open with silent precision, revealing a docking port that glowed with a soft, welcoming light. It was an invitation. Rostova knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that she was about to step out of her time and into history. She was about to meet the judge that had slept in the dark, and she had no idea what verdict it would render. This was not salvage. It was an audience. The boarding party consisted of Rostova Lee and 2 armed security officers. Thorne remained on the bridge, his job to watch their backs and keep the crippled but still dangerous hegemony ship honest. As their small shuttle crossed the gap, the sheer scale of the ancient vessel became overwhelming. It was a world unto itself, its surface a landscape of silent crystalline forests and frozen metallic plains. The script that now pulsed with light seemed to flow like rivers of data across continents of unknown material. The sigil of the scales was everywhere, a constant reminder of the ship's purpose. The docking bay was vast enough to hold a fleet. The air was cold, sterile, and smelled of ozone and ancient stone. As the shuttle ramp lowered, Rostova saw a single figure waiting for them. It was a construct humanoid in shape, but formed from the same shimmering crystalline material as the ship's interior. It had no face, only a smooth, reflective surface that mirrored their own anxious expressions. It was a messenger made of living law. I am the proctor. The construct said, its voice the same multi-toned chorus they had heard in their minds. This vessel is the Reckoner. It is an archival saint ship of the first human diaspora. It does not command. It does not conquer. It witnesses, it records, and it arbitrates. Arbitrates what Rostova asked, stepping forward. Disputes, claims, acts of violence, the proctor replied. It is a mobile court of last resort bound by the founding covenants. You have presented a case. The vessel that fired upon you has also presented its case. We have awakened to render judgment. Lee looked around the cavernous space. You've been dormant for... How long? The last entry in the primary ledger was logged 2 million standard Terran cycles ago, the proctor stated simply. The number was so immense it was almost meaningless. They were standing in a place that had been waiting since before their species had learned to write. Ancient does not begin to describe the scale of this place. The proctor led them from the docking bay into a hallway that seemed to stretch into infinity. The walls were not walls, but cascading streams of light and data-flowing equations and legal precedents written in a language of pure mathematics. It felt like walking through the mind of a god. The Reckoner requires a formal petition to act, the proctor explained. Your actions, the attempt at communication, the warning shot, the refusal to escalate, have been interpreted as a petition for mediation. And the gilded talon Rostova pressed. Their unprovoked attack has been interpreted as a confession of intent to acquire by force a breach of common law, the proctor said. But intent is not the final measure. The core of the law is balance. It demands understanding. Therefore, we require testimony. It gestured towards a vast chamber at the end of the hall. You must present your claim of right. Who is worthy to be the steward of this place, this moment? The question was not about ownership, but about responsibility. The chamber was a sphere of absolute darkness. As they entered, the void lit up around them, becoming a perfect star map of the obsidian anchorage. The stargazer, the gilded talon, and the Reckoner itself were represented by glowing icons. This is the court of precedent, the proctor's voice echoed around them. Your claim is that you are explorers acting in good faith. The hegemony's claim is that they are salvagers acting on legal authority. The Reckoner will weigh these claims. They have no legal authority here, Rostova stated firmly. Authority is a claim like any other, the proctor countered. It must be tested. The Reckoner does not recognize the legitimacy of any government post-diaspora. It only recognizes the principles upon which they are founded. Their claim is based on the principle of acquisition. Yours is based on the principle of discovery. Present your proof. This was the trial. It was not a battle of warships, but a contest of philosophies. Rostova felt a wave of doubt. How could she, a simple ship commander, speak for her entire civilization? How could she prove their way was right? The weight of the verdict would shape the future of the entire sector. Suddenly, a new set of icons flared to life on the star map. A fleet. Dozens of ships appearing from FTL translation points all around them. They were smaller, crudely designed vessels painted with zealous iconography. Thorne's voice crackled over her personal comm. Commander, massive contact group just jumped in. They're broadcasting on all channels. They call themselves the Children of Soul. They're fanatics. and they say the artifact is their holy prophet, the abacus of truth. The proctor turned its mirrored face toward the new arrivals on the map. A third claim has been entered into the ledger, the claim of faith. The construct seemed to pause, processing the new chaotic variable. This complicates the equation. On the bridge of the Children of Soul's lead ship, the righteous word. A robed confessor stared at the image of the reckoner, his eyes wide with ecstatic fervor. It is as the scriptures foretold, the abacus awakens to count the sins of the galaxy. The unbelievers of the corporate state and the godless explorers have defiled it with their presence. Brothers, sisters, we must purify the prophet. We must reclaim it for the light of the one true soul. His words were a fire spreading through his fleet. The Children of Soul ships began to advance their weapons, glowing with holy fire. They ignored the hegemony vessel and the stargazer. Their sole focus was the ancient ship. They saw it not as a court, but as an idol. The hegemony, in turn, saw the cultists as a new threat to their claim. Their comms crackled with frantic orders to bring their systems back online. The situation had escalated from a tense standoff to a three-way powder keg. Inside the court of precedent, Rostova felt the floor vibrate as the cultist ships began to power their weapons. Proctor. They're going to attack you. Their claim of faith is absolute. The proctor stated, its voice unchanged. It does not allow for mediation. It demands submission. This is a familiar paradox. The star map shifted, showing the trajectories of incoming energy blasts from the Children of Soul. Their petition is one of purification by fire. The Reckoner must respond to all petitions. How can we prove our claim is superior? Lee asked, his voice strained with urgency. What proof can we offer against zealous faith or corporate greed? Rostova thought of her orders of the Confederacy's endless quest for knowledge. She thought of the star charts they so carefully filled the respect they held for the unknown. And she thought of her own past, a mission where she had followed cold, hard numbers, and it had cost lives. She had learned that reason without empathy was just another form of violence. This ancient mind did not ask for a perfect answer. It demanded an honest one. Our proof is not in our laws or our technology, Rostova said, speaking to the proctor, but also to herself. It's in our intent. We came here to learn, not to possess. We offered communication before we showed force. We believe that what we don't know is more valuable than what we can own. She took a deep breath. The Reckoner teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars or chains. Our claim is this: we wish to be its students, not its masters. The proctor remained silent for a long moment. The mirrored face seemed to look through her, weighing the truth of her words. Outside, the first volleys from the Children of Soul were about to strike. A claim of stewardship, the proctor finally said. This is a rare plea. It has not been entered into the ledger for 1,000,000 cycles. The star map around them began to spin, the icons of the ships glowing brighter. The Reckoner accepts your testimony, Commander Rostova. The claim of stewardship will be weighed against the claim of acquisition and the claim of faith. The court is now in session. Instead of powering shields or weapons, the Reckoner did something entirely unexpected. A vast, complex array of crystalline structures on its dorsal spine began to glow, emitting a low, resonant hum that vibrated through the hull. It was not a sound of war, but of creation. The ancient arbiter was not preparing for battle, but for a lecture. Outside, the space around the Reckoner began to shimmer. A swarm of billions of tiny reflective particles, each no larger than a grain of sand, was expelled from the ship. They didn't form a wall or a shield. Instead, they spread out, creating a diffuse, almost invisible cloud that engulfed the entire battlefield surrounding the hegemony ship, the Children of Sol fleet, and the small stargazer. Each particle was a perfect mirror, a fragment of the Proctor's face capable of reflecting not just light, but energy and data with perfect efficiency. The cultists' energy weapons streams of plasma and disruptor bolts struck the cloud and were instantly reflected. Not back at the ships that fired them, but at each other. A Children of Sol vessel firing at the Reckoner found its volley redirected to strike the ship next to it. The entire fanatical fleet descended into chaos as their own attacks turned on themselves. It was a perfect instantaneous lesson in the cost of aggression. Your violence is your own. The ledger simply balances the account. The hegemony ship, its systems finally recovering, attempted to fire a volley of missiles. The mirror cloud descended upon them. Each missile's guidance system was fed a perfect reflection of its own tracking data, convincing it that its target was located at its own point of origin. The missiles turned, chasing their own tails in a futile, self-destructive dance. The gilded Talon was disarmed by its own logic. On the Stargazer's bridge, Thorn could only stare in amazement. "It's not fighting them," he whispered. "It's correcting them. It's forcing them to bear the full consequence of their own actions instantly." Inside the court, the Proctor turned to Rostova. "The claim of acquisition and the claim of faith have been answered. Their methods have been mirrored back to them. Now we shall test the claim of stewardship." The star map dissolved, replaced by a single complex equation that floated in the darkness before Rostova. This is the state of the system. 3 hostile parties, 1 neutral observer, and 1 arbiter. The system is unstable. Balance it. It was another test. The Reckoner was not going to solve the problem for them. It was asking her what she would do with the power it wielded. She could have it destroy the other ships. She could have it hold them here forever. She looked at the equation. It was a tactical problem, a philosophical dilemma, and a moral trial all in one. The machine was built to teach by example, and now it was her turn to provide one. "Calliope," she whispered into her comm. "I'm sending you an equation. I need you to run a full simulation. What happens if the Reckoner mirrors not their weapons, but their engine signatures?" The AI's voice in her ear was hesitant, a rare flicker of something like confusion. "Commander, the energy outputs would be immense. It would create a resonance cascade. The effect would be unpredictable." "Unpredictable is the point," Rostova countered. "They're all trapped in their own aggressive logic. We need to break the board, not just win the game." She looked at the Proctor. "The answer isn't to punish them. It's to separate them, to enforce a peace by making it impossible for them to remain here." She pointed at a variable in the floating equation. "Mirror their engines. Turn their desire to stay and fight into the very force that drives them away. Let their own power become their exile." The Proctor considered her solution. The air in the chamber grew still. "This is not a punitive action," the construct mused. "It is a corrective one. You do not seek to win, but to end the conflict for all parties. The solution is elegant." The equation before Rostova pulsed with a bright, approving light. "The claim of stewardship is provisionally accepted. Your first act as steward shall be executed. A mirror can be used to judge, but it can also be used to guide." A new command flowed from the Reckoner to the cloud of mirror particles. They reoriented, no longer focused on weapons, but on the powerful drive plumes of the hegemony and Children of Sol ships. The very energy they used to maintain their position was captured, amplified, and redirected into a controlled, irresistible push. Their engines meant to give them control now betrayed them. The ships began to accelerate, sliding backwards away from the reckoner on vectors they could not fight. It was not a violent shove, but an inexorable, overwhelming tide. Captains screamed at their helmsmen to compensate, but it was like trying to fly against a hurricane. The more power they applied, the faster they were pushed away. The reckoner was using their own strength to eject them from the system. It was a masterful, non-lethal gambit that turned the logic of aggression into an engine of retreat. From the bridge of the Stargazer, Rostova watched as the two hostile fleets were herded away, their angry comm chatter fading into the distance. They were not destroyed, but they were defeated, outthought by a philosophy 1,000,000 years old. The obsidian anchorage fell silent once more, the only light coming from the glowing hull of the reckoner and the distant, uncaring stars. The mirror cloud coalesced, flowing back into the ancient ship like a silver river. The Proctor's image appeared on the Stargazer's main view screen. The immediate conflict is resolved. The ledger entry is closed. Commander Rostova, your stewardship has begun. The construct's mirrored face seemed to hold her gaze. However, the entities you have repelled will not simply accept this outcome. They will return. They will bring greater force and they will adapt their methods. The first lesson is over. The next will be more difficult. A new count had begun and the stakes were now the highest imaginable. Rostova stood on her bridge, the adrenaline of the last hour slowly fading, replaced by the immense crushing weight of her new reality. She was the de facto guardian of the most powerful and significant object in known space, a vessel that could defeat fleets without firing a shot, a judge from a forgotten era. It was a power no single person should wield, yet the responsibility had fallen to her. Her small survey ship was now the sole protector of a living law. "Calliope," she said, her voice heavy. "What are the long-range strategic implications?" Calculating, the AI responded. "The Glyptan hegemony will likely declare war on the Terran Confederacy, citing this incident as an act of aggression and illegal seizure of assets. The Children of Sol will declare a holy war, branding you and this vessel as either heretics or a stolen prophet. The probability of a multi-front conflict involving overwhelming force within the next standard month is 98.7%. The AI paused. "Our odds of survival are statistically negligible." Lee looked over from his console, his face pale. "Commander, what are your orders?" It was the question that hung in the void. What now? They couldn't run. They couldn't hide the reckoner. And they couldn't possibly win a war against two major powers at once. She looked at the image of the ancient ship, its lights now soft and patient. It had given her a choice, a test. It had shown her its way of balancing the scales. Now she had to live up to that ideal, even if it was impossible. She had to teach them a lesson they could not ignore. A colonist on a terraforming project hundreds of light years away adjusted the atmospheric filters for the night cycle. She hummed a lullaby for her sleeping child, a song passed down through generations, its origins lost to time. It was a song about a ship that sailed the stars, not with sails of light, but with scales of justice bringing peace to the dark. She thought it was just a children's story, a myth. "My orders," Rostova said, her voice finding a new, hard-won strength. "My orders are to uphold the law." She turned to face her crew. "Gian, open a channel to Terran Command. Highest priority encrypted. I'm sending them the full data logs of this engagement. Thorn, I want a full diagnostic on our power systems. We may not have weapons, but we have a very powerful voice." She took her command chair, the worn material a familiar comfort in a suddenly unfamiliar universe. The Reckoner had mirrored the violence of her enemies back at them. Now it was her turn. She would mirror the truth of what happened here across the entire sector. She would send the hegemony's comm logs, their illegal salvage claim, and their unprovoked attack to every news outlet and independent system. She would broadcast the Children of Soul's fanaticism, their willingness to fire on a neutral vessel in their zeal. She would turn the light of truth into a weapon. Calliope, she set a plan forming as audacious and as elegant as the Reckoner's own gambit. Begin drafting a formal declaration, not of war. A declaration of legal precedent. She leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the star-dusted void. The obsidian anchorage is now under the protection of an arbitrating power bound by ancient law. All territorial claims are nullified pending review. Any vessel entering this system will be subject to the judgment of the Reckoner. It was an impossible declaration from a single outmatched survey ship, an act of legal defiance on a galactic scale. It was a bluff, a gamble that the truth amplified by the legend of what had just happened here would be a more effective shield than any warship. The ledger was open for all to see, and she was writing the first new entry. The Proctor's image remained on her screen, its mirrored face impassive. It had offered her stewardship, and this was her first true act. It was not an act of command, but an act of teaching. She was showing the galaxy what the Reckoner was not by hiding it, but by holding its principles up for all to see. A profound sense of calm settled over her. The odds were impossible. The enemies were legion. But for the first time in her career, she knew she was standing on the right side of the equation. The hegemony and the Children of Soul operate from the shadows, she explained to her bridge crew, her voice ringing with newfound purpose. They rely on misinformation, on bullying isolated settlements, on their threats being more powerful than the truth. We are going to take that away from them. We will not fight them in the dark. We will bring them into the light. Thorn looked from the tactical display to Rostova, a slow spark of understanding in his eyes. We're not fighting a war for territory. We're fighting a war of information. A legal battle. Exactly, Rostova confirmed. The Reckoner is our evidence. It is our witness, and it is our courtroom. She looked at the ancient ship floating serenely in the void. It had slept for 3 million years, waiting for a reason to wake. Now it had one. And so did she. The responsibility was terrifying, but the clarity it provided was absolute. As the encrypted data stream began its long journey toward Terran command, Rostova felt a subtle shift in the ship's gentle hum. On the main viewer, the sigil of the scales on the Reckoner's hull pulsed once a slow, deliberate beat of light. It was an acknowledgement, a confirmation. The first lesson had been given and received. Her tenure as steward had been tested and for now found worthy. But as the Proctor had warned, the next lesson would be harder. The forces she had angered were not bands of pirates. They were empires of greed and faith, and they would not be deterred by a single elegant defeat. The quiet of the anchorage was not a peace. It was the deep breath before the storm. The broadcast rippled outwards from the obsidian anchorage, a ghost in the machine traveling at the speed of light. It was a simple, stark package, the unedited comms from the gilded Talon, the ship's own sensor logs proving its unprovoked attack, and Commander Rostova's brief, clear declaration of legal precedent. It was not a plea or a threat, but a statement of fact, as cold and unyielding as the void itself. The Reckoner had awakened, and the old laws were in effect. On 100 worlds, news feeds flickered with the story. Corporate servers at Glyptan Hegemony headquarters were flooded with frantic inquiries from shareholders. In hidden temples throughout the Perseus Arm, the Children of Soul saw the raw data as a holy text, proof of their prophet's righteous fury. a senior executive of the Glyptan hegemony, a woman named Kyra Valanis, whose face was a mask of cold corporate fury, watched the engagement logs for the 10th time. She was not a ship captain, but a strategist, a player of markets and empires, and she saw the encounter not as a defeat, but as a failed acquisition. The asset had proven more complex than anticipated. It used their own energy against them, she mused to her assembled board of directors, her voice cutting through their panicked chatter. A perfect feedback loop. It doesn't fight like a warship. It debates. It wins arguments with physics. So we send a fleet, growled a retired admiral on the board. We overwhelm its processing power. We hit it with 1,000 missiles at once. A crude and expensive solution, Valanis countered, waving a hand to dismiss the idea. You think like a soldier. This is a legal problem. The asset operates on a system of rules. It mirrored their energy because that was the argument they presented force. She brought up a star chart highlighting a sector of the anchorage filled with colossal dead machinery. We must present it with a problem it cannot solve with a simple reflection. A problem where the rules themselves become a weapon. A predatory smile touched her lips. We will give it a choice between two impossibilities. We will teach this ghost a new lesson about cost. A new kind of war would be fought not with cannons, but with calculus. A technician at the Zeta Prospect Research Outpost, nestled within the skeletal remains of a Dyson swarm, sipped her bitter recycled coffee. Her name was Anya, and she was charting the decay patterns of the ancient megastructure. It was quiet, lonely work. Her only company was the low hum of the station's life support and the faint, ghostly shimmer of the dead solar collectors that formed a cage of shadows around them. Her comlink chirped with the news from the core worlds. An ancient ship, a legal precedent, a lone Confederacy commander holding back a corporate fleet. It felt as distant and unreal as the myths the story invoked. She finished her coffee unaware that her small, insignificant outpost was now the designated fulcrum upon which an empire would leverage its power. On the bridge of the Stargazer, a tense quiet had settled. They had won the first round, but the silence that followed felt heavier, more menacing than the battle itself. They were a single ship, a handful of souls standing guard over a power that could reshape civilization. "We're getting responses," Commander Lee reported, his voice hushed. "Terran Command acknowledges receipt of our data. Their orders are cagey. They're telling us to hold and observe pending fleet review. They're afraid. They don't know what to make of this. They're politicians," Thorne grunted from his station. "They see a crisis and they form a committee." He pointed to a fresh set of icons on the long-range display. "The hegemony is less hesitant. A new fleet. 10 cruisers looks like a heavy carrier and something else. One ship is massive and its energy signature is masked." The enemy was not just returning. They were evolving. "They are not approaching us directly," Calliope noted, her synthesized voice cutting through the tension. "They are setting a course for the Dyson swarm ruins at the edge of the anchorage." Rostova felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. "Is there anything out there?" "One Terran-flagged installation," Calliope replied. "A small civilian research outpost. Zeta Prospect. 12 personnel, no defenses." The trap was as obvious as it was brutal. They weren't coming for the reckoner. They were coming for the innocent, to force her hand, to make her choose. She could stay and guard the ancient ship, abandoning 12 of her countrymen to the hegemony's mercy, of which there was none. Or she could move to protect them, taking the reckoner into a battle of the hegemony's choosing on their terms. It was a classic hostage scenario scaled up to the interstellar stage. A moral crucible designed to break her. Proctor Rostova said, opening a channel to the construct within the reckoner. The hegemony is threatening a civilian outpost to force our engagement. The mirrored face of the proctor appeared on her screen. Its voice was as calm and ancient as ever. This is a known legal tactic. Coercion through endangerment of a third party. The ledger has many precedents for this. What is the correct response? Rostova asked. The Reckoner's prime directive is to arbitrate conflicts presented to it. It is not a guardian. It does not initiate action. Its function is to balance the scales, not to preemptively shield every soul in the galaxy from harm. To act would be to choose a side before the case is presented. The logic was flawless and utterly inhuman. Calliope's voice echoed the same cold calculus. Commander, the proctor is correct. The Reckoner is an asset of unparalleled strategic and historical value. The 12 lives at Zeta Prospect, while statistically significant on a personal level, do not justify risking this vessel. The logical course is to remain here and document the hegemony's war crime. Rostova looked from the impassive face of the proctor to the cold, hard numbers on Calliope's display. They were both right. It was the smart move, the logical move. But it was wrong. She thought of the faces of the 12 researchers, people who, like her own crew, had answered the call of the unknown. They were not numbers in an equation. They were a responsibility. The claim of stewardship she had made was not just for the ship, but for the principles it represented. And justice that does not protect the innocent is no justice at all. The law is meant to serve life, not the other way around. No, she said, her voice quiet but absolute. We will not stand by. We will not let them pay the price for our actions. She looked at Thorn. Set a course for the Dyson ruins. Maximum sustainable speed. Thorn, the man who saw threats in every shadow, smiled faintly. Aye, Commander. The proctor's mirrored face seemed to process her decision. You are choosing to act as a steward, not just of this vessel, but of the principles you claim to represent. You are placing the spirit of the law above the letter. This is a bold interpretation. The ledger will record the outcome. The transmission ended. Rostova felt a profound sense of isolation. She was acting against the counsel of her AI and the ancient construct. This decision was hers alone. The weight of command had never felt heavier. The journey to the Dyson ruins was a silent, tense passage through a graveyard of ambition. The ruins were the dream of a forgotten civilization, a swarm of millions of orbital platforms and solar collectors designed to encircle a star. The project had failed. The star had died, and now the skeletal remains of the swarm floated in the dark, a web of silent metallic ghosts. It was a perfect place for an ambush. The massive structures would block sensors, mask energy signatures, and create a complex three-dimensional battlefield. As they entered the outer edge of the swarm, the Stargazer and the Reckoner navigated a canyon of dead machinery. Sunlight, ancient and weak, glinted off vast solar arrays that were cracked and pitted from millennia of micrometeoroid impacts. The silence was unnerving. No sign of the hegemony fleet, Thorn reported, his eyes scanning the tactical display. But they're here. I can feel it. They want us deep inside, Rostova murmured. They're controlling the engagement space. A Priority 1 distress call cut through the quiet. It was from Zeta Prospect. A woman's panicked voice filled the bridge. This is Anya Sharma of Zeta Prospect. We are being hailed by a hegemony fleet. They're demanding our immediate surrender and, oh God, they're powering weapons. We see you, Zeta Prospect. Rostova broadcast back, her voice a calm anchor in the woman's storm of fear. We are en route to your position. Do not surrender. Help is coming. A promise made was a debt that must be paid. They rounded a colossal skeletal ring structure that had once been a habitat and saw the trap. The hegemony fleet was waiting arrayed in a loose semicircle around the small, fragile research station. And in the center of their formation was the new ship, the one with the masked signature. It was a monster, a brutalist wedge of dark metal that seemed to drink the light around it. It had no visible weapon ports, no missile tubes. Its entire forward section was a complex, layered lattice of gravity projectors. Volanis watched from the bridge of her flagship, the Gilded Talon now repaired and serving as a command vessel. Her prize weapon, the Terminus Est, was ready. "The target is in the cage," she said calmly. "Let them see the flaw in their logic. Fire the lance." The Terminus Est did not fire a beam of light or a bolt of plasma. It fired space itself. A wave of focused, distorted gravity erupted from its forward array, not as a projectile but as a ripple in the fabric of the universe. It moved at the speed of light, silent and invisible. The Reckoner, ever vigilant, deployed its mirror cloud. The particles swarmed into the path of the incoming. Nothing. The gravity wave passed through the cloud as if it wasn't there. It was not energy to be reflected. It was a fundamental force. The wave struck the Reckoner's port side. The ancient ship, which had effortlessly turned aside a fleet's worth of firepower, shuddered violently. A deep groaning sound echoed through the hulls of both the Reckoner and the Stargazer, a sound of immense stress. Crystalline structures on the Saint ship's hull, fractured hairline cracks appearing on its ancient armor. It was wounded. For the first time in millions of years, the Arbiter had been struck a meaningful blow. The perfect defense had met a question. It could not answer. Alarms blared across the Stargazer's bridge. "Energy spike from the lead hegemony ship," Lee yelled. "It's a gravitic distortion. The mirror cloud is ineffective. The Reckoner is damaged." Calliope reported, her voice flat, but the implications were catastrophic. Minor hull fractures, power fluctuations detected in the primary conduits. The attack bypassed its defensive paradigm entirely. Rostova gripped the arms of her chair as a second wave washed over them. This one was targeted at the Stargazer. The small survey ship twisted its internal gravity plating, screaming in protest. A power conduit on the bridge ceiling burst, showering the deck with sparks. Thorn was thrown from his station, his head striking the bulkhead with a sickening thud. He slumped to the floor, unconscious. A red light on the damage control panel began to blink, a new grim countdown. "Thorn is down," Lee shouted, rushing to his side. "Med team to the bridge." The hegemony had changed the equation. They had found a way to harm the untouchable judge. They had created a weapon based not on energy but on the laws of physics themselves, and now they were methodically taking them apart. Volanis's voice, cold and triumphant, echoed over the open comm channel. "Commander Rostova, your stewardship is a failure. Your guardian is a relic. Your law is meaningless before the power of a superior strategy. Surrender the Saint ship, and we will permit your crew and the station's researchers to live." Rostova looked at the image of the wounded Reckoner, the sparks raining down on her bridge, the still form of her weapons officer. The cost of her choice was being tallied in blood and broken steel. Doubt, cold and sharp, pierced through her resolve. Calliope's logic had been correct. She had gambled and lost. But then she looked at the Proctor's face on her secondary screen. It was, as always, a mirror, and in it she saw her own determined, defiant reflection. The ledger was not yet closed. "Gian, get back to your post. Get Thorn to the sickbay," she ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. She took control of the tactical station herself, her fingers flying across the console. Calliope analyzed the gravity lance's energy profile. Every shot it takes, how much power does it expend? What is the recharge cycle? Give me the numbers. The energy expenditure is colossal, the AI replied after a moment. Each pulse requires the equivalent of a starship's entire reactor output for a full second. The recharge cycle is approximately 15 seconds. 15 seconds. A window. But a window for what they couldn't run. They couldn't hide. And they couldn't fight back. The Reckoner had no weapons, and the Stargazer was a lamb in a den of wolves. The old ways of battle were useless here. A new strategy was required. Rostova's mind raced connecting the pieces. The Reckoner teaches by numbers. It remembers by ledgers. Its first gambit was a mirror, a lesson in consequences. What was the lesson here? The hegemony was using a brute force of cosmic proportions. They were spending energy on an unbelievable scale to bypass the rules. They were, in effect, cheating the system. And if there was one thing a judge, a cosmic accountant could not abide, it was an unbalanced book. Proctor, she said, her voice low and intense, the hegemony is expending immense energy to attack you. Can you measure it? Can you quantify the exact energetic cost of their hostility? The construct's voice returned a low hum of processing power. The Reckoner records all energetic transactions within its sphere of influence. The expenditure has been noted. It is a significant debt. Then it's time to call it due. Rostova breathed the plan crystallizing in her mind, a desperate, beautiful, and utterly insane gambit. They want to ignore the cost of their actions. You're going to make them pay it. She turned to her AI. Calliope can. The Reckoner link its energy absorption systems to the mirror cloud, not to reflect, but to conduct. The theory is plausible, Calliope said, its voice laced with a new tone of computational surprise. It would require rerouting the entire power grid. The mirror particles could be reconfigured to act as a distributed capacitor, a net to catch and hold energy. But to what end, Commander? The hegemony flagship, the Terminus Est, is pouring out. A universe of power, Rostova explained, her eyes gleaming with a feverish light. The Reckoner is a perfect energy sink. We're not going to block the next shot. We're going to catch it, and we're going to send them the bill. It was a lesson in economics delivered with the force of a star. Another gravity wave washed over them, and the Stargazer cried out in protest. But this time something was different. As the wave passed the space around the Reckoner, and its small companion shimmered, the mirror cloud, reconfigured and repurposed, had absorbed the residual energy of the blast, the chaotic secondary radiation that bled from the gravitic pulse. It was a fraction of the total power, but it was enough. On the bridge of the Reckoner, the Proctor watched as a new equation was written on the walls of light. The steward's plan was audacious. It was not a reflection of force, but an audit of it. It was a pure expression of the machine's purpose. The action is authorized, the Proctor broadcast to Rostova. The debt will be collected. The dorsal arrays of the Reckoner, the ones that had generated the mirror cloud, began to glow with a fierce white light. It was not preparing to defend. It was preparing to issue a receipt. The Terminus Est began to power up for another shot, its massive reactor straining to bend the universe to its will. Fire, Valanis commanded. The gravity lance pulsed. But as the wave erupted, a single focused beam of pure data lanced out from the Reckoner. It was not a weapon. It was an invoice. The beam struck the Terminus Est and delivered a simple, undeniable message to its ship's computer. The message was a mathematical proof detailing the exact energy cost of the attack just fired and a legal lien under the Reckoner's ancient covenants for immediate payment of that energy. The hegemony ship's own systems bound by the fundamental laws of energy conservation that even they could not rewrite were forced to acknowledge the debt. And the Reckoner collected. The energy that was meant to power the gravity lance was instantly and irresistibly rerouted. It flowed out of the Terminus Est's reactor through its own systems and into the void, a forced payment on a debt its captain didn't know he had accrued. The ship's lights flickered and died. Its engines sputtered. Its life support went to emergency backups. In a single, silent moment, the most powerful warship in the hegemony fleet was rendered inert, its power core almost completely drained. It floated in the dark, a cold, dead husk. The Bank of the Universe does not extend credit for war crimes. The rest of the hegemony fleet stared in stunned disbelief. Their ultimate weapon had been defeated by accounting. Valanis stood on her bridge, her face a pale mask of shock. She had presented the Reckoner with a problem it couldn't solve, and it had responded by refusing to play her game, instead enforcing its own. It had not destroyed her weapon. It had bankrupted it. Before any of the other ships could react, a new fleet translated from FTL on the far side of the Dyson swarm. This time, it was Terran Confederacy warships, a full battle group finally arriving in response to Rostova's call. But they did not see a battle in progress. They saw a crippled hegemony fleet, a single glowing ancient vessel, and the small battered surveyor that stood with it. The war was already over. The remaining hegemony cruisers, their chain of command shattered, and their trump card neutralized, turned and fled. They wanted no part of a fight against a ghost that could repossess a warship's soul. The children of Sol, who had been lurking at the edge of the system, saw the defeat of the hegemony's technological terror as a sign. This was not a prophet to be captured, but a divine power to be revered from a distance. Their fleet, too, slipped back into the darkness. The balance of the scales had been restored. Admiral Singh of the Terran Confederacy flagship, Leonidas, appeared on the Stargazer's main viewer. His face was grim, etched with the stress of a man who had expected to walk into a massacre. "Commander Rostova," he said, his voice heavy with a respect that transcended rank. "Report. The situation is under control." Admiral Rostova replied, the exhaustion of the last few hours finally settling into her bones. The bridge around her was a wreck, the scent of ozone and burnt wiring thick in the air. The hegemony's hostile actions have been audited. A new precedent has been established in the obsidian anchorage. Singh looked at the magnificent glowing form of the Reckoner, then back at Rostova. He understood. She was no longer just one of his commanders. She was something new, an envoy to a power his fleet could not command, and his government could not comprehend. "I see," he said slowly. "It seems your declaration was not a bluff after all. The truth, when properly leveraged, was the most powerful weapon of all." In the weeks that followed, the obsidian anchorage became the most talked-about place in the galaxy. Rostova's unedited logs, including the battle in the Dyson swarm, were broadcast by order of the Terran Admiralty. The hegemony's stock prices plummeted as their corporate savagery was laid bare for all to see. Faced with overwhelming public condemnation and the undeniable evidence of a power they could not defeat, they were forced to the negotiating table. The anchorage was declared a neutral territory, a zone of arbitration under the stewardship of Commander Rostova and the watch of the Reckoner. The precedent was locked. Rostova stood on the repaired bridge of the Stargazer, watching the silent, majestic vessel that had become her charge. The cost of victory had been high. Thorn would walk with a limp for the rest of his life. The Stargazer itself bore scars that would never fully fade. But they had held the line, They had taught a lesson that had been forgotten for millions of years, that justice is not about power, but about balance. That for every action there is a cost, and that the ledger, sooner or later, must be reconciled. The reckoner taught by numbers and remembered by ledgers, never by collars. It did not seek to rule, only to remind the galaxy of the rules it had forgotten. My stewardship is not a position of power, but a lifetime of service to that principle. The conflicts will come again. Greed and faith are persistent forces. But now there is a place where the accounts can be settled, where the truth can be measured and weighed. The count has just begun, and it will be a long one. Inside the ancient ship, in a chamber of flowing light, a single line of script on a vast ledger blinked and came to rest. Case File 3. Alpha Glyptan Hegemony versus Zeta Prospect. Status closed. Arbiter E. Rostova. The balanced scale sigil beside the entry glowed with a soft, final finality. The books were now in order.